I come to you all today with Michael Leonard, Beyond the Veil, Episode 4. If you just happened to stumble onto this episode, please go back and watch episodes 1 through 3, or else you're going to be completely lost. I decided to do this series so that you all could better understand who am I and why. This video, Episode 4, will bring this series to a conclusion. It will no doubt be the longest in the series. I cannot convey this to you any more clearly. If you have not seen the first 3 episodes, you would be doing yourself an unjust if you don't. That is, if you truly want to get to know me. As mentioned in Episode 3, I had become addicted to pain medication, and my marriage had begun to fall apart. I will tell you this right now, my wife was wonderful, and the only one who had any fault in the marriage failing, it is me. Imagine trying to get your husband to get off the pills, seeing him black out, being present, but at the same time, not being present at all. And the worst of all, witnessed him OD several times, and it was so bad one time that I was put on a ventilator. This is what she was dealing with on the daily, and for 10 years. I remember we were living in a trailer, and the trailer court was an absolute dump. You see, we had 2 big dogs, and had raised them since they were pups. Hank, who was a golden Labrador retriever. He had been given to us for Christmas one year. He was only 2 months old when we got him. Then the following Christmas, my sister adopted us a German Shepherd mix from a local shelter, and he was just 7 months old. His name was Charlie. You see, why I'm telling you this is to explain why we had chosen to move into a rundown trailer park. The answer is quite simple, really. It is because that no other apartments or houses that were for rent would allow us to have 2 big dogs. I don't know about you, but my dogs are my family, and if it meant moving into a dump so that we could keep them, we would. And we did. Please, be sure to like this video if you look at your pets as family, and then tell me in the comments if you have ever had to do what we did. As by now, you are aware of my ulcerative colitis diagnosis, and I explained to you how I had to have 3 major surgeries because of it. Well, I had gone to the emergency room one night. I was having bad stomach pain. Keep in mind, this was way after all 3 of those surgeries had been completed. When I went to the hospital, they performed a CAT scan on my abdomen. They found a mass on my pancreas, and I was also diagnosed with pancreatitis. Over the next several months, I was in and out of the emergency room. Each of those times, it was always the same symptoms. But this is when it got scary. Each time that they did a CAT scan on me, that mass that they had found on my pancreas, it was growing, and very quickly. After having gone home one night, I opened up a medical app called My Chart. I looked at the terminology that the doctors were using when describing the mass that they had found. What I read, it took the blood straight out of my head, and I felt like I was about to pass out. When reading the doctor's notes, he stated that he was highly suspicious of malignancy. This was right around the time that the host of Jeopardy, Alex Trebek, he had been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And I thought back to Patrick Swayze, how he had died of that type of cancer. Every article I read basically said that there was no cure. I thought back to my mother. Now, this is where I have to go back in time. My mother had died just a couple of years prior to all of this. I watched that woman age to be what looked like 10 years in just one single year. I said to myself that, seeing what chemotherapy did to my mother, that I could never do it. But now here I was. Would I stick to my word? Things are always different when you're actually living through something, instead of talking about something. My mother's death was extremely hard on me, especially my sister. She's still not over it. Just 2 days before my mom passed, God rest her soul, I had gone to the hospital to have an overnight with her. Keep in mind, I was a full-blown addict at this time. This eats at me, what I'm about to tell you. What I am about to tell you is exactly what my mother witnessed just 2 days before leaving this earth. She witnessed her son. He was needing to get high so bad that he had left her hospital room, walked across the street to an emergency room, just so that he could fake that he was in pain and then get shot up with pain medication. Then, once I left the ER, I got my pain meds filled at a local pharmacy, and then, to top it all off, I had purchased alcohol and then sneaked it into my mother's room, where she would then have to witness her son, who was stoned out of his mind, sneaking sips of beer. I'll never forget the look on her face, and I assure her that it would be okay. Now, I'm not a rocket scientist, but I do know that when you enter a room where alcohol is open and you're not drinking, that you can smell it. The nurses knew what was up. I believe that given the gravity of the situation, they may have given me a pass. Just to think, that was the last time my mother would ever look into my eyes. That is what she took to the grave, her son, high as a kite, sipping from beer cans in her hospital room. Okay, going back to my medical situation. I literally have tears running down my face. No lie, I'll hold on to this until the day I meet her again, and I'm able to apologize. Anyway, they had set me up with a pancreatic surgeon. They did this test, where they went down my throat, and then they stuck a needle through my stomach, and then into the growing mass on my pancreas, and took a sample. I'll never forget waiting on those results. And when I did eventually get them, I was about to hyperventilate. I found out that what I had, that it was precancerous, and that it needed to be removed. Long story short, they had to remove my healthy gallbladder, my healthy spleen, and then half of my pancreas as well. After the surgery, my recovery was horrible. I remember while laying in my hospital bed, my surgeon walked in. I immediately blurted out, "Precancerous, right?" He shook his head. "No," and he said, "Not even that. You see, what I had, it was what they call a pseudocyst. It wasn't even precancerous. Yes, I was happy, but for absolutely no reason. I lost my spleen, gallbladder, half of my pancreas, and now I am forever a type 2 diabetic as a result. I want to mention another important thing in my life. One day, I was so high on pills, not to mention how drunk I was, I had decided that I was going to unalive myself. My wife called 911 as I was holding a knife to my throat. I remember yelling to the dispatcher over the phone. I yelled that I was going to force them to shoot me. So, here we go. The cops showed up, and very fast. We lived in an apartment building at the time. It was unknown to me at the time, but the police had closed off the entire block that surrounded my building. When I exited my building, I was holding my knife, and everything seemed to be moving in slow motion. I don't remember much, just that they were yelling commands to me. And then, it was as if God spoke to me, and all at once, I knew that I did not want to die, and I allowed the cops to take me into custody. Despite the gravity of the situation, the officers were really nice to me. In fact, they were even thanking me and told me that they didn't want to have to take a life that day. Long story short, I was sent to jail for 2 weeks. My charges were inducing panic and aggravated menacing. Though I was only locked up for 2 weeks, what I learned there was very eye-opening. Me behind bars? I never thought that I would ever do any kind of time. I used to always watch the show 60 Days In, and that is exactly what it is truly like in there. As crazy as it sounds, I was actually released on Christmas Day. I'll tell you what, doing this series, it is a lot of work, yet therapeutic at the same time. But I cannot stay on subjects long, or this will never end. At the beginning of this video, I mentioned how we had moved into a dump. Well, one winter our pipes had burst, and the landlord refused to fix it. To simply put it, you cannot live without water. So, what we did was, we had moved out and into a pet-friendly hotel. We had decided that we would stay there, save up money, and get into a new place. But the cost of staying there was far too much for us to do that. Well, one night I woke up with chest pains, and my wife took me to the emergency room. She looked defeated, but even with that, I would have never guessed what was to happen next. They performed another CAT scan. I swear I have had over 60 of those scans, and that's probably an understatement. God only knows the long-term effects I will have from having all of them. Well, the scan revealed that I had blood clots in my lungs, and I was immediately admitted. To this day, I strongly believe that when I got that certain shot, for the things that shut the entire world down in 2020, I believe that is what caused the clots. One day, while laying in my hospital bed, a security guard walked into my room. I remember that he looked a little off, as if something was bothering him. In his hand, he held a note, and he handed it to me. He never said a word, and then immediately left my room. I opened it up, and it was a letter from my wife. In the letter, she explained to me that she couldn't bear it anymore. She had packed up all of her things in the hotel, including my dogs, and then left for New York. She had left me, and was moving to her mother's. I immediately thought back to the letter that my mom had left my father. There I was, a man in his 40s, and his wife had just left him and did so through a note. I was shocked, at a total loss of words. Later that day I had left against medical advice. My wife had taken the car, so I had to pay for an Uber. I thought back to just a couple of months ago when I had purchased the car, the same one that my wife was now using to drive to New York. You see, I didn't have a driver's license because of an operating vehicle impaired. Losing the car to her had never entered my mind. We had been married for 18 years after all. This is when my life completely nosedives to the ground. I only had 2 nights left in the hotel and did not have the money to stay any longer. We had planned on using my wife's pay this week for the hotel. I was in utter shock. My world had just imploded from all around me. What was I going to do, I asked myself, and I had no answers. I ended up calling my brother. He drove to the hotel, picked me up, and then dropped me off at my sister's house in Pittsburgh. Both of them, I could tell that I was a huge nuisance for them. To say that I entered a dark period, that would be an all-out lie. This was darker than dark. My wife was gone, my dogs were gone, and I no longer had a place to call my own. Then, my wife had the audacity to send me a photo of both of my dogs in the back seat of the car that I paid for, and on their way for New York. I'd only put the vehicle in her name because the insurance would have been cheaper. Looking back on it now, I believe that my wife had planned on leaving me for a couple of months. That is why she didn't care if we were staying at a hotel. It was because she already knew that she was leaving. She just had to be granted the opportunity. To say that I was depressed, that would be unjust for you. My sister had ended up kicking me out, and my brother did not want an active addict living with him either. They both had children also. Quickly, before I forget. I want to go back to when my mother passed away, just for a moment. My uncle had told me that he was going to pick me up and then take me to my mother's funeral. You see, he tricked me. He had set it up so that I had committed to riding along with him, so that when he canceled on me, I'd be unable to make it. And that is exactly what happened. When I called him, he told me that the family did not want me there, and if I were to show up, that they would have called the cops. Looking back on it now, I wish I had found a way there. That was my very own mother's funeral, and I had missed it. Now back to when my wife left me. You see, this was it. I had hit rock bottom. One night, I had taken a full unopened bottle of a benzo, and I also took an unopened bottle of Ambien, 30 pills in one bottle and 90 pills in the other. That night, I was found slumped over outside of my sister's apartment. My sister fought with everything that she had to save me. When the paramedics arrived, I was not breathing, and I did not have a pulse. I woke up 3 days later in a hospital room, and a police officer was sitting beside my bed. "Welcome back," he said to me. Like I said, guys, I can't stay on subjects for too long. If I did, the series would never end. Ultimately, what had happened is that I would check myself into mental wards claiming to be suicidal. I was homeless, and I only did this for shelter, to shower, be able to eat, and to get my medications. I had ended up talking to my sister, and she had agreed to let me come stay with her again, so that's what I did. There would be times where it was just me there. My sister would stay at her boyfriend's house, and quite a bit. She lived beside a farm, and I remember that there was a huge barn there, and inside that barn, there were horses and a bunch of donkeys. When sitting on my sister's porch, lost in my own sorrow, I would hear those donkeys cry out. You know, that distinctive sound that they make. I would walk down to the barn, and I swear it was as if those animals could sense my depression. The horses would come running to me, and each of the animals would look at me in the eyes. I was broken, completely broken, and they knew it. Ultimately, what happened is that I had checked myself into a detox program and was there for a couple of weeks. From there, I moved into the residential program and was there for 2 months. And finally, I transitioned to what they call a sober house. All in all, I attended 6 months of intensive in-house rehab, and it was the best decision I have ever made. I am now 3 years sober. I had so many experiences while attending rehab, and perhaps, just perhaps, one day I will do a series on that. So I stand before you all and admit, I am a sinner. I am not perfect. It was in rehab where I found Jesus, and have had a relationship with him ever since. Now, The picture in the background here. I am sure you have noticed that I've used an image of a radio tower, and standing below that tower is a beautiful young woman, and I've used these images multiple times. The time has now come for me to introduce to you a girl that I first met at the age of 17 in a dream. Since that fateful night, this young woman has visited me in my dreams over and over again. In the first dream, she was standing under a radio tower, and the location of that tower is authentic. It currently stands, with its deep red pulsating light, directly across from where I attended high school. Every time that I dream of her, it's always nighttime. We never kiss, nor is there any kind of sexual desire. It is her presence alone. It is absolutely euphoric. In some of the dreams I may die, full of fright, only for her to come along, and with her, she erases all fear, all anxiety. Even while married, this girl below the tower, she continued to visit me. Her hair, it is long and dark, and her eyes, deep brown. Ironically, when first meeting my wife, she had long, dark hair, and she also had brown eyes. After my divorce went through, I walked outside. It was late into the night. I remember looking up at the sky, and it was then when I spoke out loud. God, please, I know that things are on your watch, not mine, but please hear me now. If that girl, the girl that I always dream about, if there is something to this, if she is real, please, please, Lord, bring her into my life. I asked God for that, and then for one more thing. You see, I did not know the fate of my dogs, and I desperately needed closure. So I asked the Lord to bring me my closure, and if, only if, the girl of my dreams, if she was real, to introduce us, this time though, in the physical world. Keep in mind, guys, I was married for 20 years, and for 18 of those 20, we lived together. I thought, that's it. I'm married, and this is forever, but it wasn't. Looking back on it all now, listen, I accept that I ruined our marriage, but I just wish that she would have gone about everything differently. I'm going to be honest here. I'm a hopeless romantic. Marriage for me, marriage should be forever, and that is how God intended it. But it takes both husband and wife together to make that happen. By the time that I had cried out to God, I had been single for 2.5 years, and I was lonely. When I give my heart to a woman, I give her not only that, but my soul as well. I want a partner, guys. I stayed with my wife, even though she could never have kids. And now what? I am 45 years old. Parenting is something that sadly has passed me by. So anyway, I had asked God what I asked him. Now fast forward a couple of months. I was feeling really low one day, and I went on Facebook, and then made a post in my city's local group, and I casually asked to meet new friends. The very next day, a girl sent me a message and had responded to my post. We hit it off very well, and then something else happened, and on that same day, my wife had sent me a message. She asked if I was willing to sign the divorce papers. I told her that I was, but needed to know about my dogs. It was then, when she told me that both of them had passed, and promised me that upon signing the papers, that she would send me their ashes. And that girl, the one who had reached out to me, she sent me a photo, and wouldn't you know it? She had long dark hair and dark brown eyes. Could this really be happening? I asked myself. Closure and meeting a woman that matched the description of the girl in my dreams. Now listen, as I was making this video, I decided to not talk about my involvement in Anonymous. That being said though, one of the first assignments that I had with them, it was to snoop and even take over a local Freemason social media platform. Let's just say that I did just that, and that, my friends, that will be a video all of its own. Also, the girl that I had just met, that too, will have to be a standalone video. So, how shall I end this? I will end it as such. Remember that Jesus Christ came to the earth and died for all of us, so that we may have salvation. When looking at your Christian life, you may become overwhelmed with living up to God's laws. Know this, that the laws, they only reveal our sin. We can never live the perfect life. You have seen my past. I wasn't always good. Stop trying to follow every law put forth by God, and relax. Take a breath. It is not through our good works that get us to heaven. It is only through God's grace, so stop trying to be perfect because you are not. None of us are, and none of us ever will be. God knew this. He created us. That is why God incarnated in Jesus Christ and humbled himself as a man. He came down here and took that burden away from us by dying on the cross that day. So, did you enjoy the series? Has your opinion of me changed? And if so, in what way? Guys, I truly want to thank each and every one of you for your amazing words and your continued support. So, did this video earn a like? Or perhaps, just perhaps, you will subscribe to my channel now. I am not sure when, but soon I will do a video on actually meeting face-to-face the girl that had reached out to me on Facebook. But that is all for now. I love you all. This is Michael Leonard signing off.